Hey everyone, it's Nick in Berlin. We're going to be going live at the top of the hour. So in about 10 minutes. Welcome if you're in the house early. I'll be showing you around some extra cool stuff. Let me know in the chat if you're already here, where you're from, where are you, where you're viewing from. What are you up to? Is there anybody there? Is there anybody there? Send me a wave. I look forward to showing you Berlin. Hey, Sharpar from Tehran. Welcome aboard. You're the first. How is Tehran? I suspect it's a little bit, perhaps warmer. Michaela D. I used to know someone called Michaela D. I suspect that might be the same person. Give me a wave, Michaela D, if it's you. Rainy. That'll be the rain shadow of your mountains, I suspect. You can see here it's not exactly blue sky. But it's kind of nice. Hi, Sarah. Sarah Moesi, where are you? Let me know if you've been to Berlin before. You got any questions? We're going to be wandering through Berlin. Ah, Michaela D. from Köln. Herzlich willkommen. More in Tehran. Tehran is in the house. Always wanted to go there. Always wanted to go. Nikki Olroyd is in Edinburgh. Good old Edinburgh. Welcome, Scotland. Got the old flag going there, ready for your second referendum. Maybe. You be quick. Schöneberg. Berlin is in the house. Maryland. Welcome one and all. Just give me a quick 360, show you where I am. Anyone who's been here before may be able to work it out. Like that building there. Anyone know who works in there? The most popular leader in the world, the most powerful woman in the world. Any ideas who that might be? Vancouver, 6 months, lived in Berlin. Jeanette, welcome aboard. Alexa BP knows the answer to my question. 2019, yeah, that was about the last time, Shapar, that you could actually come here. Hey Rebecca. Cancun. Nikki Olroyd nails it with Angela Merkel. It's got a little emoji there, I can't see with my glasses on. I'm taking that as positive. Yeah, big days at the moment, because of course Chancellor Merkel will be stopping in September. And major parties are coming forward with their candidates, so big stuff happening, because what happens in this town, as you know, and if you don't, I'm glad you joined me, what happens in this town affects not just people in Berlin and Germany and Europe, but, you know, Berlin's got a seat at the top table in the world, and our decisions here, made in that building behind me, affect everybody. More Ontario in the house. Hi, Shannon. How are you all doing? I'm just trying to work out time differences. So let's think, it's midday on the East Coast. Or Sharpar, you were here and you went on the pub crawl. Yeah, I did a few of those. I'm going to be going on a kind of a little Corona-friendly personal version of that when we finished, I think, because the bells have just rung and that signals beer o'clock. We've been lucky with the weather. 1987 from Michaela D. That is old school. California, 9 a.m. So probably third coffee. Diana Garrity. How many coffees have you had? I need at least 3. Otherwise I can't kickstart. Oh, Viviana, kisses from Argentina. That is making my day. Midday, so brunch, right? One so far. Probably a better idea. I was going to stop drinking coffee and move on to tea, but can't do it. Let me just change the camera, and I wanted to show you something. We're right down here by the river, and I was a bit worried because just down there were these little baby ducks. I can't see them anymore, but they were definitely on their own. Brazil. Nacia Silva. Bom dia to you. So, a few more minutes, folks, we'll be going live. I'll take you over the road. One of the nice things about doing these things on Sunday is I don't get killed before we start. First coffee at Sunday, late start, that's what I like to hear. I've been getting up at dawn because I've been doing an archaeological excavation in Berlin, and I'm still kind of feeling the effects. See down there? There's a canal harbour. This is Berlin's main station. And where I'm standing now, this was West Berlin. All of that was Communist East Berlin. So it gives you an idea of how crazy this town was during the Cold War. That was a communist city, the capital of Communist East Germany. The wall was built on that side of the river, the famous Berlin Wall. And here I am in the West. And one of the first sad deaths on the Berlin Wall was just there around that corner. A guy called Gunther Litvin, who'd gone back because he wanted to look after his mum because there'd been a family tragedy. 1961, the wall had gone up. He was in West Berlin, the wall had already gone up. So he went over and he tried to get back by swimming over here and got shot. Station is a maze. It's kind of cool. It doesn't look that big, and that is, in terms of the numbers of trains that go through there, the busiest station in Europe. I think, because I'm originally from London, you might be able to tell I'm not a German person. I don't know if they've ever been to the station that I went to school on, Clapham Junction, London. Dude, that is a busy station. And I think they mean continental Europe. Every 40, 50 seconds a train leaves there, but it's kind of Sunday. So, and it's Corona. We did quite well in Corona to start with, but now all sorts of weird stuff's going down. You folks out there, let me know, you got your vaccination yet? I've been trying to find a private doctor who'll do it because, as you can see, I'm just so young that I'm not going to be on the normal lists. But send me a number. You had 0? Anyone had 1? Anyone had 2? Washington State, up in the top left-hand corner. Rick Steves' country. Rick Steves is fantastic, dude. Super nice guy. I saw him a couple of years ago here. Always enjoying his travels. Michaela D has had 1. Congratulations to you. You know what happened here? We were doing really well. Everything was great. So I've got 2 masks in my pocket. There's one place on this tour I'll have to put a mask on. Yeah, the house arts, the private doctor waiting list, it'll be a while. Yeah. Hey, Diana Geraghty has already had 2. She is vaxxed up and ready to go. Yeah, the AstraZeneca thing, that's Alexa BP. Yeah, it's kind of complicated, that, but you know, if someone said to me, Nick, you want to have AstraZeneca tomorrow, I'd say yeah. Don't know about you, but I'd say yeah. You know, I've got places to go and things to do, you know. Here, we've actually got a curfew. I never thought that in my life I'd have to say, get back before the curfew, which is 2200 hours, like 10 o'clock in the evening, Central European time. Isn't that weird? Oh, we've got plenty of people. Jeanette Wilkinson's had 1. Nikki Olroyd has been fully vaccinated. Lucky you. Yeah, UK didn't do too badly, but I don't exist there because this is my hometown, for better or for worse. I don't regret it. Yeah, there's a ramp up in Germany, says Alexa BP. She seems, or she's very well informed. I reckon, yeah, they did 1 million a day in Germany. A couple of days ago, kind of an unreported milestone, so we'll be all right. Diana Pombo loves Berlin. Yeah, me too. I look forward to showing it to you. Any minute now, folks, we are going to start. So if you've got other people out there, it's not just you. Press share, send it to your friends. They can come along and enjoy and join our tour as well. Send us some thumbs up. People are respecting the curfew. Yeah, we're we do what we're told. But in a minute, I'll tell you a story about rather a lot of people. Last night, it was May the 1st yesterday, who didn't obey the curfew, even though the police put it out at 5 minutes to 10. They're like, the curfew starts in 5 minutes, people. But I don't think many people were listening. So, folks, sit back, make your second coffee if you've only had one, or keep chewing your brunch, or whatever you're doing. I look forward to showing you Berlin, and share it with other people. I bet you know folks who could spend an hour wandering through Berlin. This is about as close as we're going to get to exploring it all together. But keep your questions coming as we go through. I can see them popping up on my screen. It's great to communicate. I am here for you, all right? And if I wasn't here sharing Berlin with you, I'd probably be wandering around talking to myself. But you need to tell me questions, things you don't understand. I'll be asking you questions as well. And bear in mind, like, questions are not a test, and there is no such thing as a right or wrong answer. And most of the answers are literally going to be like a number or one word. And at the top of the tour, let me just chuck this one out, and seeing as that we've got the chat going. Don't overthink this, just feel it, right? When you hear the word Berlin, it's a super important town. If I say the word Berlin, what is the first thing that pops into your head? While you're letting that word pop into your head, let me just tell you who I am. My name is Nick, and thank you Diana Geraghty for sharing. My name is Nick, and I'm originally from England, and I'm an archaeologist. I had a first career as a archaeologist. I went all over the world shouting at people and digging up holes. I literally created history, and that's why I'm so happy that I just spent a month doing it again. It is the best job in the world, getting down and dirty and digging up some history. I'll tell you what I found and show you where it was from a distance in just a few minutes. But I moved to Berlin. It's kind of complicated. I was working for University of Berkeley. If you've got any Berkeley alumni out there, I was working for University of Berkeley in Bolivia. I had a friend here. I came and I stayed, and that was like half my lifetime ago. But I reckon Berlin's the most important and interesting city in Europe. In fact, at the top of the tour, I say that Berlin is the most important and interesting city in Europe. Because to understand Berlin is to understand why the world is the way it is. And that's what we're going to explore, kind of a long story of Berlin's life. And of course, we'll think about, Berlin today, folks, because at the end of the day, we're just going to be wandering through Berlin primarily today, thinking about the stories. We've got some great answers. Michaela D comes in with the Berlin Wall. Fair enough. We've got World War II coming in as well. Bears, that's always an interesting one. Berghain, the famous club. Yeah, that's in a little bit of trouble at the moment. Turbulent history and currywurst from Nikki Olroyd. That is a great answer, because if you look behind me, you can see the famous Reichstag. I'm going to head down there in just a sec, because I thought we'd start here for two reasons. One is this is where Berlin began, and so we're going to be telling kind of the long story, like 1,000 years of Berlin's history in nice kind of bite-sized pieces, so you get a sense of what Berlin's all about. But we're also going to be dealing with some more kind of events, the major events that took place in Berlin, and the anniversary, if you're interested in Berlin, anniversary of the end of World War II is not just now, it is for Berlin, it was today. So in 1945, at 12:30 on the 2nd of May 1945, a ceasefire was called in Berlin. The place was ruined, everything was smoking, the Red Army had invaded the town, and World War II would come to an end. Officially, 6 days later, the unconditional surrender would be signed. But I wanted to start here, because that view behind me is of the Reichstag, the Parliament building, is what the Red Army were heading to raise the red flag in 1945. Let me just change the camera around here. On this bridge, this is the Moltke Brücke, and right there, here, on the 28th of April 1945 was a rifle corps. They were the 79th Rifle Corps of the Russian or Red Army 3rd Shock Army. They were under the control of a man, an officer called Perevertkin, and he was inside that building checking out the battle, organising with a kind of observational posts. There's a customs building. He was organising the attack on the Reichstag. When the Russians got here, some of these folks had been fighting for thousands of miles, all the way from maybe Stalingrad on the Russian, on the Volga River. They saw that. The the heart of the Nazi capital. And the story is they actually thought it was too small, and they asked locals, they're like, where is the Reichstag? And everyone said, it's there. And they said, well, that's too small, there's got to be another one. Like, where is the other one? But this is the view. It took them 48 hours to cross here at the cost of maybe 6,000 casualties. So I thought we'd start on this bridge and walk that walk, given that it was happening these days in 1945. Matthias Holzacker, he says David Bowie. That's what Berlin reminds him of, which is kind of cool. In fact, just over here, I can show you something that appeared in the U2 album, Achtung Baby. I just want to show you this. This is the Moltke-Brücke. When the Red Army crossed it, German soldiers tried to blow it up, but they kind of goofed because only that side of one of the three arches collapsed. The Russian tanks took them a day to get over here. But I just wanted to show you this sign, just at the beginning, this plaque. Now this is about the bridge, but if you just cut out everything on the right, you get three words that to me sum up Berlin. Erbaut, it says at the top. That means built. Zerstört, 1945. Destroyed in 1945. Erneuert, rebuilt. Built, destroyed in 1945, rebuilt. If there's something in Berlin that sums up the whole life of this town, for me it's those three words. So, that is the River Spree. Now I know where some folks are. I come from London, we've got the Thames, other folks have got big rivers. That's not exactly the Mississippi, but we like it. And the archaeological excavation that I was doing relates to that. Because you think, if I've seen where some of you are from, keep those things coming in and send it to other people that you might know, share with them and get them involved in other places. There are always reasons why a town is where it is. In the old world, if you like, it's usually, I'd say, like Tehran. You've got mountain passes, agricultural land, big rivers, it's near the sea, natural resources. For the new world, it's going to be things like railway lines, rivers too, like things like airports, trade routes. None of those things fit this town. But we just crossed the River Spree, and without it, this town never would have made it. So let's just go down and have a quick think about it. I was thinking of where to start this story, and Berlin's kind of young. Now, as an archaeologist, I've got a different understanding about what young means, but Berlin's about, shall we say, until recently we thought it was about 750 years old. But if we look over here, there's the main station. All over there during the years of the wall, as I mentioned before, to some, that's communist East Berlin. I'm in the west, but people might know this. This is the TV tower. That is the heart of communist East Berlin, and that's where I was excavating just below it. This area, this river, was formed by the Ice Age, and the story of Berlin, you could say, is 20 million years old, but luckily you can do in one sentence the first 18,500,000, and that is, if we go back to 20,000 years ago, we do the first 18,500 years. This was all covered with ice, great big chunks of ice, a couple of kilometers high. When it melted, it left this, the river, and it left the lakes, and it left the very high groundwater in Berlin, which is why, as you'll notice, Berlin is not a high-rise city. Everywhere we walk today together, below my feet, at 20 feet, 4 meters, there will be water, and that's been a big problem for Berlin's building programs. But when that ice melted, it dumped all the rock that was in the glaciers. That rock came from Scandinavia, and that rock would form the channels that the river runs through. It's a very marshy, wet area up here, and it also would leave rock, granite, for the first Berliners to build their buildings. First Berliners, for our story, 1,500 years ago, were a Slavic group. They were mentioned by the Romans, but the Romans never got here, and they would name two towns. One was on that side of the river where the TV towers. That is called Berl. Berl, like a lot of names in this area, means swamp. Very soggy part of town. On this side, where we are now, what becomes the western side of or the southern side of the river, there was a little village called Köln, and that's where I was digging. So, a couple of days ago, I was looking at the remains of the oldest Berliners, and I was lucky to be asked by two colleagues of mine, Sewell and Mellish, the archaeologists who organised it. Their excavations now pushed Berlin's life back by an extra 100 years. These skeletons were from the middle of the 1100s. So it said in the description that I was an archaeologist and I dug up old graveyards. I was doing that on a kind of a scientific basis rather than just, you know, digging up graveyards, which frankly is frowned upon by science and the law. So these two little villages, Burl, they got taken over by Christian knights. Remember those crusades down in the Mediterranean? Such romantic figures as Richard the Lionheart and all those sorts of things. Saladin. Christians moving north in Europe, that took place as well. So groups of Christians came here, they eventually settled, took over the place, and let's say by 1100, so 900 years ago, you had these two small villages on either side of the river. They would then need people, this new territory. It was like, people moving in the States, like the Oregon Trail, moving into these new areas to make a new life for themselves. But folks, it was attractive. It's like if you're young, you want a new life. We've got good agricultural land. We've got trade routes moving across Europe from Moscow through this marshy area. Berlin's river will be important. You could cross the river here, and then you could connect with places to the west. You could get to the main trading port of Hamburg. You could connect to down to Spain, down to Italy in the Mediterranean. So Berlin starts as a really vibrant place. It wants to make something of itself. It's always a mix of different peoples, and that is something, the beginning, Chapter 1, this town that pushes itself forward, I think it's a theme that you can trace in the rest of the tour as well, in the more familiar modern history. I'm standing on an open space. Berlin is kind of a haunted city. I think it's haunted by its past. And at the end of the day, folks, it is spring 2021. I can't give you an idea of how nice it smells. Like spring, in Berlin, that's a nice weekend, you know what I mean? But you've got that kind of, I'll show them later on. Like all the trees for like 48 hours are kind of like glowing green, and it's been raining, like the gods have shined us, because I think we're going to be okay for the hour or so of our tour. But everything smells fantastic, that kind of like the smell of all the new blossoms after the rain. Just had our cherry blossoms are all out. It's kind of cool. But Berlin's haunted by its past. It's 2021 and that past is receding, and that is okay. Berlin is the capital of Germany. It's the heart of the new 21st century Europe, and it's become what it always wanted to be. But we're here to think about how Berlin became the way it is, because that affects all of us. You ever wonder about the European debates like Brexit? You worry about rivalries between things like Russia, the States. All of this is a legacy of really what happened after World War II, the so-called Cold War. We're thinking about those details, how Berlin got there, because this is the town that defines the 20th century, the last, say, 120 years of Europe and the world's life. Hope you can all hear me if anything happens, like the feed slows down or the mic falls off or whatever. Let me know, I can still see even if you can't hear me. But keep me posted, questions, that kind of stuff. So I'm standing here because in the last year we've all become like Netflix people, right? Who saw The Man in the High Castle? Remember that? Man in the High Castle was a pretty freaky show. It took me a bit of a time to actually kind of like work out the hell they were doing there. But you might remember at the end where our kind of anti-hero, remember the guy who's in charge of the states? The main character, he has to come to Berlin and make a speech. And he made a speech in this sort of absolutely enormous domed building. And I think one of the best things for me, because I don't really like doing kind of historical fiction, was the CGI rebuilding of what would have stood here, because if you look around, you'll notice everything's gone. That is the Swiss embassy, and that bit was there before World War II. When I first came, everything behind me was not there. We're going to walk through it. I'll explain in a couple of minutes what it is. It's the government heart of the new German government. But everything was empty, and the reason it was empty is because Hitler's architect, Albert Speer, came here a year before World War II started and knocked everything down. And here, blocking out the sun, would have been an absolutely enormous building. When the Russians came, this was a huge space filled with water. They dug like a hole to put the building in, and it would have been 1,000 feet high, like up there in the sky. And below the dome, it would have looked a bit like the Capitol in Washington. Below the dome was a room for 186,000 people to gather in. Now, if you look here, the TV tower is a fair old way away. See it there? Top of that, there's a meter there for every day of the year. Top of that is 368 meters above the ground. This ball here is 208 meters above the ground, 700 feet, and the Nazi dome would have been halfway up that spike. Absolutely massive. But best version of that I've seen is in Fatherland and in The Man in the High Castle. That would have been right here, but as you can see, it's now turned into this park. So Berlin's not just haunted, Berlin's kind of like haunted, and its stories are around surviving buildings, but also stories around things that literally aren't there, because after World War II the town was damaged and it had to be rebuilt. Over there, as you've already established, Swiss Embassy. This is the current Chancellor Merkel's office, but we're going to head to the Reichstag. Think about that because it's the most symbolic building in Berlin. Yesterday, today and tomorrow. This is the extension, so this is essentially the extension for the parliamentarians, of which there are over 700 I think now, representing the major parties. The Parliament building itself is just for the parliamentary meetings. Let's go back to our story. This funny little vibrant trading town becomes quite successful. It's kind of strange when you think about it, because there isn't really that much that you think Berlin would have to trade. But we know from the records in the great port city of Hamburg that Berlin was fourth in terms of material that it would trade, and it was famous for certain things. One was rye. Now with rye you can make bread, or you can make the liquid version, beer. So Berlin beer was imported by Hamburg and exported through its trading network, and the other thing was wood. So oak, probably, and as a result of that trade, very few of the old oak trees left in Berlin. But by 1300, it's kind of amazing, connected to this global trade route, people when you think about it, Berlin's in the middle of nowhere, right? It's in the top right hand corner of Germany. Behind me, that's west. If we went that way, east, 60 miles to my left, we'd be in Poland. But people here had cinnamon, sugar, they had ginger, pepper, all the things that were coming from Asia through the great trading ports of the Eastern Mediterranean, up through Southern Europe, and those things had arrived pretty early on. But they were ruled by a family, Berlin and this area, kind of these new territories, until the late 1300s, early 1400s, when there was a succession dispute. A member of the Ascanian family died, and there was a fight between like robber barons. You know, here we are, way out in the eastern badlands of Christian Europe, but a new family came. They restored order, and that family were called the Hohenzollern, and the Hohenzollern would rule this town until the end of World War I. And at the end of the day, that is the chapter 2 of Berlin's life. And chapter 2 we're going to be thinking about first here, because we've now come on to an area that they've sadly blocked off, because May the 1st is riot day in Berlin. So last night, even this morning, down in the districts of Kreuzberg, a little bit of Neukölln, kind of funky parts of town, there's traditional car burning and cop fighting going on. Nothing what it used to be like back in the old days. 20 hospital or 20 injured police, that's about a tenth of what it used to be like. But it still goes on. A bit of rioting and car burning on the day of the workers. And so the Berlin kind of bolshiness is still there. Chapter 2 starts here at the famous Reichstag building. This is all blocked off because of demonstrations that took place here as well, and they're just concerned, perhaps as a result of January the 6th, sadly. Now, one of the things that folks notice, this is the German Parliament building, it's the famous Reichstag. It was built in 1894, and I am a dude with a thing in my hand. This is the German Parliament building. Okay, it might be a Sunday and it might be Corona, but like, look at the security. Isn't that interesting? They're usually a couple of random cops over there. I was doing a BBC show a few years ago, and I parked a car over there, started to unload great big black things, like long tubes and stuff. And the police came over and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm filming with the BBC." And he said, "Oh, you got a press pass?" And I said, "No, I haven't got a press pass." And he said, "That's a shame, otherwise I'll let you in." Didn't want to know who I was, what was in these great big black tubes we were unloading. So either they know what they're doing or they made a terrible mistake. 1894, a couple of decades later, 1916, that was added. Now, if I tell you that the V there is pronounced like an F in English, so a F, anyone want to hazard a guess about what that says? Above the Parliament building, Jeanette Wilkinson lived in Kreuzberg. Oh, it was at the Bethanian Hospital. Wow, that's funky. That's cred if you lived in the Bethanian Hospital squat in Kreuzberg. Nicky Olroyd's been up in the dome. As we get further away, you'll be able to see it. Press pass, thing of the past. See, not in this town, but it's kind of old school. Anyone want to hazard a guess? Dem Deutschen with a V, but it's pronounced as an F. Volker. Dem Deutschen Volker. Go on, be brave. It's very similar to the English word. Dennis wants to know why it's all blocked off. You know, it's been like this, not just Corona and riots for May the 1st. It's been like this for a while. It means to the German people. Built in 1894, symbolises the end of Chapter 2. Shannon got it right, the German people. Nicky Olroyd got it right as well, for the German people, getting that genitive. That is cool. Anyone on Twitch? You can chat with me on Twitch as well. Haven't seen any of those, just Facebook. So send in some Twitches. Yeah, 1894. This building was built for the United German, United Germany. So let's have a little think about that. If Germany was formed in 1871, the reasons of which and the monument of which I'll show you and tell you in just a sec. Anyone know what Berlin was the capital of, if it wasn't the capital of Germany before? Here, the area where the Russians crossed, this is where they'd arrived on April the 30th, 1945. That was the day Hitler would kill himself and abandon the German people, leaving perhaps 57 million people dead all over Europe. We'll go to that place to finish shortly. But this here, there used to be a column here that now stands in the park with the golden goddess of victory. Nicky Olroyd is in the house. She says, Prussia, question mark. Don't be shy, that is exactly right. Prussia. Now, Prussia was northern Germany, most of what's today Poland, little enclaves in Baltic states. And the royal family that took Berlin over at the beginning of the 1400s was called the Hohenzollern. Now, the Hohenzollern would impose their will, realise that they were in this kind of like eastern territory. Their family originally came from southern Germany, and they realised there was a chance they could make something out of this new little town. So they reorganised, survived great conflicts in the first 200 years between Protestant Europe and Catholic Europe. And then, just by chance, because it was quite rare for European royal families, there were 4 sons who each became the ruler of Berlin and Prussia, who were healthy, one after the other, who were very smart, very ambitious, and they would in 4 lifetimes turn this town into a village in the middle of nowhere, to the town that would become a European city. That's 4 short lifetimes. Let's say 1650, the end of the 30 Years' War, 1650 to 1786. The last and most famous of the Prussian kings was called Frederick the Great. And those 4 kings I'll tell you about in a sec, they turned Berlin from backwater to European power. And that would leave Berlin on the brink of taking charge of the German-speaking independent kingdoms, of which there were about 32 in the 1800s, and managing to kind of merge those together to create modern Germany. The thing that made modern Germany, after over a century of discussion amongst the Berlin is a state today. Germany is a federal republic, United States of Germany. There are 16 states. The southern ones were Catholic, the northern ones Protestant, so there was a great rivalry and suspicion of each other. Austria was a German-speaking power that was kind of mixing it up from the 1800 onwards as a movement to join Germany together would develop. Other countries were working against that because they didn't want to see a united Germany within Europe in the 1800s. But there was one of the consummate politicians of the last 500 years of European history, the man in charge of Berlin and Prussia on behalf of the royal family, and his name was of course Prince Otto von Bismarck. And Bismarck would play this very cagey game, playing sides off against each other, making sure that countries couldn't sort of gang up and surround Germany, Tsarist Russia, Poland, France to the west, Austria to the south, playing this very cagey game. But eventually through war he managed to create one Germany, and those wars were against Denmark, Austria and France in the 1860s and early 1870s, and that would leave Prussia as the dominant European military and political force in Central Europe. The result was the building of this building, the Reichstag, in eventually 1894. But Germany, of course, still had an emperor, the last of this Hohenzollern family who'd come here in the 1400s, and his name was Kaiser Wilhelm II. We'll touch on those slightly later on. But let me just change the camera so that you can see what we're doing here. You'll notice that the column that I said is here is no longer here. That was moved during the 1938 clearance the Nazis made to rebuild this whole area with Germania, destined Berlin after World War II to become the capital of the world. And as you can see, they never got round to it. It laid empty as the Russians came through, and now in the 1990s it was filled with the core of the new German government. And in 1999 this became the meeting chamber. And there's the dome that Nicky Oldroyd managed to go up to, and one day maybe we'll be able to go up there and play in the restaurant. And on the roof, still got Russian graffiti carved on the roof. Now, but think about these details later on, but I want to show you a window. It's this window here. Germany unified, and there was this great spirit of nationalism. Berlin would feel that it was now leading a new country that had right to become a global colonial power. It was the time of the great empires, the French, the Belgian, the British Empire that covered nearly all of the globe, and Germany rushed to catch up on that. And that would upset the balance of power within Europe, and would cause a conflict in the Balkans, what used to be called Yugoslavia. Now the problem with that, of course, was that all the countries in Europe had alliances with each other, they all had big armies as they're kind of arming to become European powers. So when there's a dispute in Serbia in July of 1914, after the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, then Austria and Germany will support each other against Russia, and Europe slips accidentally into World War I. That was the end of the royal family, because on that window, on the 9th of November 1918, out onto the windowsill climbed the leader of the Social Democrats. His name was Philipp Scheidemann. There was a huge crowd here after 4 years of the horrors of World War I in the trenches, and everyone wanted to know what was going to happen. And he makes a speech to the people here, and he shocks them, and he says the war is lost, an armistice has been called, the Kaiser has gone, he's going to spend the rest of his life in Holland, and after 500 years of royal family rule, that phase is finished and Germany would try democracy. Now that democracy had to deal with some very, very difficult issues, and one of those would be economic and political chaos. So I'll give you an idea. If we turned up at this building and stood outside and wanted to change some money, let's say a year after World War I, I could have got, with a dollar bill in my pocket, I could have got 4 Reichsmarks. By 1923, by the autumn, anyone want to give me a number? My dollar bill is no longer worth 4 Reichsmarks. How many Reichsmarks or marks am I going to get for my dollar bill by the autumn of 1923? Because in the autumn of 1923, a new local celebrity in Bavaria, in Munich, called Adolf Hitler, would be making his speeches, getting a following, party membership numbering maybe 40, 50,000. But with political and economic chaos, the Nazis would exploit that. We stand for law and order. We say that democracy has failed us. We say democracy betrayed us at the end of World War I. It's humiliated us, and we're going to right the balance, put Germany in the heart of Europe, bring back pride and bring back Germany as the heart of Europe and the heart of the world. That is a very powerful message. 1 million, says Dennis Daniel de Gaulle. Not bad, but no cigar in that one. You know what it was? It was $1 bill by November of 1923 got you 4.2 thousand billion Reichsmarks. Now, I think we'd agree that that is not a good exchange rate. Everybody lost everything, and in 1923 we were the first of two economic collapses. Hitler tried to seize power in 1928 and he was jailed for 9 months. But the Weimar government, the government in this building, the democracy was blamed for the end of World War I, for the surrender. People are looking for somebody to blame. They're then blamed for all of the problems which were a legacy of decisions made before and during World War I. And the politicians, people felt democracy isn't working, we need to go for something new. So, in 1928, Adolf Hitler had, in his Nazi party, he had 2% of that building. People were like, oh, you know, who's this guy? But, you know, 2%, who cares? 2 years later, he'd gone to 18%. By 1932, he had 37.4% of this building. Not a majority, but he got a large block of disruptive Nazis causing huge problems within the government. 1929, with another huge economic collapse and maybe 6 million unemployed, but if you think about all the people connected to them, their dependents, their parents, the rest of it, you're looking at maybe over 20 million people affected by unemployment. Hitler's in a position to rival for the chancellorship, which in desperation, not knowing what was going to happen, people thought to keep the government together, Hitler would become chancellor and they would be able to get rid of him in an election that would be scheduled for a few months. January the 30th, 1933, Hitler became chancellor. 27 days later, that building burned to the ground. Hitler then has a chance to declare a state of emergency over here in a opera house. And if you look at Virtual Berlin Tours, my YouTube channel, I've got a little video about that opera house and the speech that Hitler would make there the year World War II started. Terrible prophecy about the Holocaust. 96 politicians voted against that. These people were then persecuted, either for voting against it or later, members of left-wing parties. This is a memorial to the politicians who the Nazis would persecute, and concentration camps would be, and you'll be able to see the names here. You'll recognise there is Bergen-Belsen, for example, and that's the death date of this politician. Concentration camps are built for them. Those parliamentarily, after the fire in 1933, that would make Hitler a dictator. It would be his town for the next 12 years. Then the Russians came 12 years later and they burned the building. And on the 30th of April 1945, up here, I'll show you when we get around the back, the red flag was hoisted, Berlin was smashed, and World War II would finish and a ceasefire would be called today in 1945. Alexa BP mentions that the reason the German economy collapses was printing money, so you might not be surprised if I tell you that Germany's largest import in 1923 was paper. So Berlin starts, the village is trying to force itself forward. It's taken over by the Hohenzollern family. They realise they got a chance to set up their own independent country. That becomes known as Prussia. Building an army, organising taxes and its finances, cleaning the town up and inviting immigrants, always immigrants. Berlin was never really that tolerant of immigrants, but they realised they didn't have enough people. So we had French Protestants coming in the 1600s and Jewish communities coming in the 1670s from Vienna. Dutch who came to drain the land, royal family, were married into the Dutch royal family. And then of course by the 1800s you get millions and millions of people coming to Berlin during the Industrial Revolution. That would push Berlin's population up to, by 1930, somewhere under 5 million. Today it's got 3.7 million, maybe a bit more. Berlin's attracting people from all over the world for the new 21st century businesses as it goes for Chapter 4. Really, the 20th century, Hitler becomes Chancellor, and we're going to go and have a look at one of the memorials and touch on those stories. But I thought we'd just come down through here, given that we thought that the Reichstag behind us was taken by the Russians. The red flag was hoisted by a couple of Red Army soldiers, but they were naughty afterwards, partying in Berlin at the end of World War II, and was struck off the list and had a lesser award given to them for hooliganism. That was the crime. It was a desperate time in Berlin. Nicky Allroyd remembers the details of the fire. Who burned the Reichstag in 1933 is something that historians are still disputing. And I think, really, in the big scheme of things, the answer is it doesn't really matter. The most important thing is what happened afterwards, Hitler exploiting the fire for his own political purposes. But there was a huge trial, and one of the main defendants was a Dutch guy called Marinus van der Lubbe. Now, he might well have started a fire round the back. He was 24, he was next member of the Communist Party. That was perfect for the Nazis. You could say the communists are burning the building as a signal for a revolution. That was the idea. He might well have started a fire curtains in the hallway at the back of the building. Several other fires had started on the same day, but what he couldn't have done was started what the fire brigade concluded to be 6 elements had been used. You know, the fire brigade were quite modern. The whole wooden meeting chamber was burned, but it was a show. And that was good, and the case was so weak they actually stopped kind of publicising the trial. The thing is, Hitler gets emergency powers for a month, and that makes this his town. Now, this was the first thing built after World War II. So the Reichstag's all gutted and burned. You can see it there. 2,200 Russians are then buried here, and here you can see one of 3 Soviet memorials, flanked by the best pound-for-pound armour vehicle made, certainly during World War II, I'd say perhaps ever. That is the Floyd Mayweather of armoured vehicles. That is the T-34 Soviet tank. You've got a couple of howitzers here, and there you've got the memorial, the good old T-34, Alexa BP, a hardware fan. So this commemorates, and in 6 days this is where delegations will come to lay the wreaths and the flowers. And this was built using masonry from Hitler's headquarters building, which is why you've got filled in bullet holes on it, because this stood during the war. They dismantled Hitler's headquarters building and use it to build this. It's interesting because this is positioned for in West Berlin for a couple of interesting ideas. Remember the great big domed building the Nazis were going to build? That was going to be here in the distance. Here was going to be a road. Now we're going to cross this great big road here. This was widened by the Nazis. Here is going to be another road. It was going to come through here, twice as wide. And they never got round to it, the Nazi architects, for the urban planning. Just under the road here is actually a 2-lane motorway tunnel that was going to take the new road under here. That's still down there. It was used as a bunker. That's still under there, okay? But one of the reasons the Russians put this memorial here was to stop Berlin organising itself north-south, which is something that Berlin always wanted to do. Now they've done it, because under here you've got a road and a rail tunnel taking a bit of a curve so that it doesn't run directly under this memorial and the subterranean Nazi tunnels. The other is that this is in West Berlin, and Russians wanted the West to remember we are the people who paid with blood to defeat the Nazis in Europe. 27 million Soviet dead. And perhaps there might be trouble in a town divided between East and West. If we have a memorial, we'll always have an excuse they can't deny us to cross to the western side of the city. And sure enough, in front of the Brandenburg Gate there, on a hot Saturday night in August 1961, barbed wire was put up, and when Berlin was gone up late on Sunday morning, they realised that West Berlin, this side of the city, had been completely surrounded by what was going to become the Berlin Wall. And sure enough, the Russians would use this memorial as an excuse to cross to the western side. There in the distance is the victory column. That used to stand outside the Reichstag. That commemorates the wars that unified Germany, and it was moved by the Nazis here, and all of this was opened April the 20th, 1939, the year the war started, and that day was Adolf Hitler's birthday parade, which took 6 hours to come down this road. And of military machinery and troop marched past. Just down there on this road, 4 days before Hitler killed himself, a plane landed. And in that plane was a woman called Hannah Reich. I did the research for a book called The Women Who Flew for Hitler by a fantastic biographer called Claire Mully from the UK. And there are two contrasting lives, but the person flying the plane that landed on this road right there, 4 days before Hitler killed himself, with the town completely surrounded by Russians, her name was Hannah Reich. So I do book research. Jeanette Wilkinson wants to know, can you go into the tunnels I mentioned? Not those ones, Jeanette, I'm afraid. But even though it's, there are certain things, we're all having a tough time in tourism, and I do work underground in bunkers sometimes as well, but bunkers, if there's anywhere you can't visit during Corona, it's a bunker with no windows. So help us out. You've seen the link. PayPal me at Virtual Berlin Tours if you feel my knowledge and tour is worth something. But you can go online, search for Berlin Underworld, and when it all opens again, you can explore air raid shelters and tunnels. Super exciting. The woman who was flying the plane, her name was Hannah Reich. Now, she wasn't supposed to be flying the plane. That was a guy called Ritter von Greim. Ritter von Greim had flown to Berlin to talk to Hitler because he was about to take over the Luftwaffe, or he'd taken over the Luftwaffe. Hannah Reich is amazing. She was a glider pilot, little woman, but she had some serious firsts. She was the first person to fly a helicopter. She was the first woman to be given the Iron Cross, first and second class. She got the pilot's badge with brilliantines, so with diamonds. She was the first woman to fly a jet. Really a get up and go gal. So Ritter von Greim, he says to her in Bavaria, let's go up, see Hitler. She's like, I'm in. He said, I'll tell you what, let's go to an airbase where the helicopter that you flew inside a sports arena in Berlin is. Let's go and get that, and you can drop it in on Hitler's bunker. When they got there, it had been burned. So they got a Feisler Stork reconnaissance aircraft. As they were coming over the town, he got badly wounded in the legs, passed out the joystick. She's in the luggage compartment. She then leant over his shoulders and landed the plane right there. Flags down a truck. They go to Hitler's bunker. They're there for 48 hours. And they flew out on the 28th. She survived, he killed himself. She died in 1979. So, Hannah Reich, the last flight in and out of the burning city, using this road as the runway. Now we're about to cross for the first time into East Berlin. We're going to cross where the wall used to be. So let me just change the old camera and I'll show you what's going down here. Now, Berlin's a very political town, so if there's any demonstration, the backdrop you want on CNN, right, is going to be the Brandenburg Gate. For other reasons you'll see as well. So there's been sort of like kind of COVIDiots, as we call them here, demonstrating against jabs. It's kind of strange. So I stood here the other day and all the people here complaining about the vaccines, every one of those people had been vaccinated as a kid. So it makes you wonder what's wrong with the new one. Over there, that's all about Vladimir Putin and his regime. Not particularly complimentary. And here's the famous Brandenburg Gate, and we can recap our story. And here, in the road, see this line of rocks? I'm standing in the west, and I'm about to step into communist East Berlin, because that line of rocks is where the wall used to be. We'll follow it, I'll show it to you in again when I don't have to get run down by one of those Mercedes, because as we know, you get built-in right of way with a Mercedes. We're now strictly in the east, but we're in the death strip. Here's the Brandenburg Gate from 1796. And that line I showed you where the wall used to be is a district boundary. That's how Berlin was divided at the end of the war. A district boundary. So 8 districts of Berlin's 20. Everything you see in front of you got given to the Russians. Everything we see behind us, the garden suburbs, got given to the west. French are over there, Brits in the middle, and the Americans got the nice villa areas down in the south. So there's one wall here. This is the death strip, the killing ground, the no man's land. And over here where the trees are was the other wall, and the Brandenburg Gate was marooned in the death strip. Embassy's just round the corner, and the Shannon McIver, the wall line, it does commemorate the entire 161 kilometres of wall which went all the way round this side of the city. That's where the red flag went up at the end of the war, where the famous pictures were taken the day after, so that you'd have the Brandenburg Gate in the background. But that district boundary is where the medieval wall of old Berlin used to be. Remember those Hohenzollern family and those 4 kings? This was their front door, and this bit was always reserved for kings and queens and emperors and empresses, and that's why we are going to stride straight through the middle, as befits our regal status. When I first came, none of this was here. So what they've done here is very symbolic. All the buildings are performing the same function they were doing before, roughly World War II. Then they all got destroyed, then they all got removed because this was the Berlin Wall border, and now they are all back. So the American embassy back where it used to be. This is kind of like the was and will be again town. You've got a bank, the Academy of Art, the famous Adlon Hotel with the British embassy. Over here is the French embassy. So Berlin's gone like full circle. Shannon McIver wants to know, didn't Napoleon steal the statue? Yes, he did. Very cheeky, you know. But the one he stole got destroyed in the war. We'll have a look at the new one from 1957, 1958 in a minute. This is Berlin Central Street, and the royal family members, the 4 of them, were these. In 1648, the 30 Years' War finished, the big battle between Protestant and Catholic Europe, and a man was at the wheel called Friedrich Wilhelm. He lived in a palace, the rebuilt version of which you can see at the end of these trees. This street will be laid down towards the end of his life. These are linden trees or lime trees. He's the man who cleans the town up, organises the taxes and invites the Dutch, the Jews and the French community and kickstarts Berlin. His son became Frederick I. He did a lot of but basically, like most elder sons, this guy was a bit of a waster. He just spent money. But he would kind of like try and sort of revamp Prussia and Berlin as kind of a beautiful looking city with its boulevard here and its beautiful buildings. Then he died, and the 3rd of our royal family leaders was a man called King Friedrich Wilhelm II, the soldier king. He would use Berlin as a place to save money and build a huge army. And out of nowhere, in 3 short lifetimes, Berlin went from Nowheresville to a town with an army that could take on the European powers. And when he died, Frederick the Great came to power in 1740, and he would use the army that drilled up and down this road and on the squares on either side that you can still find on other Sandeman's live Berlin tours. Frederick the Great would use that army twice. Immediately becoming king in 1740, he annexed parts of what now Poland, and then he took on Austria, France and Russia simultaneously and left Prussia as a place that was about to, as we've heard, step forward and take charge of Germany and become Berlin a global player. Nicky Oldroyd remembers that this is where Sandeman's free tours begin. So when the world gets back to normal, come down to our meeting point, and others remember the most important event that ever took place in Berlin. Up there, 2004, Michael Jackson shook his baby out the window of the presidential suite at the Adlon Hotel, and now we will never know why. Let's have a look at the gate, because what you're looking at is the original. It's seen it all, the Reichstag in this. There's the quadriga. It's got the Iron Cross of Prussia and the eagle of the Hohenzollern family. At the beginning of the tour, some people said Berlin reminded them of bears. There's still controversy about why the Berlin state flag has a bear on it. Most history books will say it was these dukes. Remember the ones who came during the Crusades, Albrecht the Bear? But the first example of the flag post-dates them. So it's a bit tricky where the bear comes from. You've got the 4 horses and the goddess of victory, and this is a copy of the entrance gateway from the Acropolis in Athens. Frederick the Great left Prussia and Berlin as a European and soon-to-be global city. And then 10 years later, Napoleon came. He took that back to Paris. Then, after the Battle of Waterloo, the quadriga was brought back. And remember I said that was only for kings and queens? All the way until World War I, that was for royalty. After World War I, they opened it to traffic, and in fact, the guy who owned the Adolf Hotel got hit by a truck. Wasn't used to the traffic in the middle. But there was one other man who was allowed to go through there, and his name was Fool. He was the Prussian officer who got the quadriga in bits on a cart back from Paris, and as a result, he was given this great accolade. Let's go back and move forward, because World War I, World War II both begin and end in Berlin at the Brandenburg Gate, and afterwards we got the division. And the division was done using district boundaries. And there is the line. Again, look, it divides Berlin West on that side, Berlin East on this side. What would you rather do? 1950s, the dust settles, and the rubble starts to be removed. In the 50s, you get on the train, go to West Berlin. Mid-50s, the Berlin Film Festival was taking place. You've got some Hollywood stars on the red carpet. The people at the have got miniature transistor radios. All the dudes are dressed as Marlon Brando. And you come back to the eastern side, it's kind of like a dark field of rubble full of Russians, and you're under a communist system. Which side of the town do you want to live on? It's kind of a no-brainer, right? You want to live under communism. Certainly by 1953, people in East Germany realised they were perhaps on the wrong side. In 1953, East Germany collectivised all the land, took away private property, increased the work quota so they could keep up with the West. And in the West, of course, they'd been given the Marshall Plan money, billions of dollars for the rebuilding of Europe. And of course, people started to move to the only place they could get away from communist East Germany. And what would that be? A little island of freedom in the middle of communist East Germany called West Berlin. At the end of the wall's life, it was just there where Reagan made his speech. Mr. Gorbachev, you're a man of peace. Open the gate, tear down this wall. Nobody thought it would only take 2 years. But it did, and now that wall is gone, and the space in between has been filled. So over 3 million people left East Germany. All the young folks, the smart, the clever, the ambitious, the qualified, they left. And by 1957, 1958, it was getting very difficult to cross East Germany. Are checking everyone out. They're building little bits of barbed wire here, little bits of wall there. And then in 1961, within about 72 hours, 161 kilometers of wire was rolled out along this line on a map. And that side of the city for the next 28 years will be surrounded. Now there were depending on where you came from and what kind of passport you had, there were 14 ways to cross the wall. There was rail, air, foot, foreigners, military, diplomatic crossings. But of course, if you're in East Germany, you've got to risk your life to try and cross, because in between was the death strip. Now the walls were removed in 1993. They were kind of recycled. You've got recycled Berlin Wall under this road. And at the end of it, Berlin would build the corporate district of Potsdamer Platz, Berlin's new 21st century face, symbolically gluing together an area left by the wall, West Berlin and East Berlin. So all the main industries came here. That's the German railway, Mercedes, hotels, accountancy firms. That is the second of the two big building sites done since the fall of the wall. You've now seen them both. And it's the most travelled wall in the world. There's over 42 countries with wall. In fact, Diana Geraghty has seen it outside the library in California, the Reagan Library. So it's all over the shop. But let's just take things down a notch and get a little bit solemn, because in the 90s there was a discussion here about what to fill this bit of the former Berlin Wall with. And now that Germany was one country and Berlin was the capital again, for the future you need to deal with the past by a program of what in German would be translated as management of the past. In the 50s there was, from the pain and shame and trauma of World War II, a kind of an attempt to amnesty, forget, sweep it under the carpet. New generations would force it into the 1960s, producing things like trials. A very brave man called Fritz Bauer, Attorney General from Frankfurt, would organise trials, the Auschwitz trials and others, in the 1970s. But the German capital needed a memorial, adding to the hundreds that are already here, and what you're looking at is the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. Now, the Holocaust, for reasons that, if you're interested, send me, put it up in the chat and we can do a tour that just deals with this. It's a standalone crime behind the smokescreen of World War II. There are many Nazi victims groups, but the Holocaust with a capital H involves European Jews, and the groups used to be called Gypsy, so Sinti, Roma and others, in terms of how it was done, why it was done, where it was done. So 2 new memorials were built, and this one is the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. You've got 2,711 unmarked concrete blocks, and what we're going to do, I'm not going to say anything, I'm just going to walk through this and try and give you a sense of what it feels like, because this is an emotional memorial. There's no information, you're not being told anything. I want you to look at these now. Don't overthink it. What do they remind you of? And when we come out, I can look at your messages. You come here, you think this is the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, what most people call the Holocaust Memorial. And then you walk through it and you feel it. So I'll see you on the other side in a couple of minutes where we can pull our tour together. Ben Goshen wants a Jewish tour. No problem, let's set that up. It's a beautiful little area, the old Jewish quarter of Berlin. I'd love to show it to you. Ben also remembers there's a museum here. So down there you got the data. But Berlin's very good at modern memorials. This makes you feel. And from some comments it looks like, though it's of course very difficult for me, it gives you a sense just walking through it. I can't give you an idea of how it feels every time. But you get a sense, it's coming over, it's quiet, you can probably hear my feet there. It's very disorientating. That's not just the gimbal and the feed. I was, especially, it's interesting, you feel disorientated because the blocks are much higher, but as I moved, show you left and right, the moment you're not concentrating, you start to lose your balance. You're like, woo. It's a really interesting thing. We've had some ideas of what they might. Oh, it's Bar. Apologies, Bar Goshen, not Ben. It's the Arabic in me. It's good ideas about what it might represent. Train carriages. Other people saying it looks like a graveyard, which I think is a natural connection. 2,700 blocks, so a very powerful memorial. So there's information should you want to know more about the details. It's kind of a rational and an emotional memorial. And it's right in the centre of the city, so a very powerful, but you can imagine controversial, shall we say, site. Now I thought we'd just come down here because the anniversary, we thought about that plaque at the beginning of the tour. It was built, it was destroyed in 1945 and it was rebuilt. We can actually, let me just show you. You're the last people to see this the way it's looked for the last 15 years because this is happening. So it was built, all the buildings here were destroyed and now they're being rebuilt. These ones were built by East Germany. This is the Wilhelm Strasser where the government of Berlin would work from unification, 1870s. And the last person to move into the Chancellor's building down here was Hitler, and he would kill himself just down here in what would become known after the war as Stunde Null, like zero hour, as Berlin rebuilt. And now this is where the Berlin Wall used to be. One wall was here, one was over there. All of the space is being rebuilt, the new skyscrapers have come in, and though they'll survive for a while because there are people living in them, these East German apartments built for the elite of East Germany, you imagine, back garden wall was the Berlin Wall here. So you had to have people you trusted not to try and escape to the west. So in here lived a man called Gunther Schabowski. He's the man who opened the Berlin Wall in 1989 at the press conference. Nice old buffer, died a few years ago. And here, some of you might remember Katharina Witt. Remember that skater, East German ice skater girl? She used to live in there. But it's all going to be redeveloped, this space. But Berlin has arrived. You think about the idea of the young, thrusting medieval town, the royal family that take it up to become a European city. And then Berlin tries, it goes on a path, a kind of a grasp at world power which covers Europe and the world in blood. And then there's a pause as Berlin becomes a symbol of which way will the world go politically, what will the rest of our lives be like after World War II. And Berlin's got, you know, freedom, democracy and capitalism and communism here. And that battle would last for 40 years. And then, as we mentioned, Reagan, by 1989 the wall would fall, Berlin's rebuilt, it's unified, and it's finally got that global voice, the voice that it always wanted. But this is where World War II would finish. So on April the 28th there was a balloon here. This is where Hitler's headquarters building used to be, filling this entire space. There was a balloon that supported the radio aerial, got shot down. After that they were incognito. The Russians were at the end of the road and that far away on all sides. Down under here in two bunkers, one under here, finished in 1940, one under here, finished in 1940, well never really finished, but started in 1943. Hitler and his core crew would spend the last days of his life. So on April the 28th, he was told it's all going to be over in 48 hours, so he married his girlfriend, Ava Braun, into the morning of the 29th. Then they wrote their wills. On April the 30th, right here, there was an exit house. Little concrete block with a door in it from the emergency stairs, 40 metal stairs. At the end of the road to the right were garages, and in there, siphoned out of the broken vehicles by Hitler's chauffeur, a guy called Erich Kemke, he got 180 litres of kerosene. The bodies were brought upstairs. You can see this is the room, outside the room that Hitler killed himself in with Mrs. Hitler. The staircase ended here at this little building. And just to the left, where those French soldiers are standing, was a depression where the bodies were burned. Those bodies were found on the 4th of May. They were identified using Hitler's teeth and dental fixtures by his dentist and his x-rays and the dental assistant, and those things are in Russia. The rest of the body was probably, even though it's disputed, probably destroyed, and the ash was thrown into the river in Magdeburg in former East Germany in April of 1971. This one was removed, the top one, in the late 1950s, and this was removed in 1987, 1988, when East Germany began this building here, leaving what's essentially like a jagged, dirty concrete swimming pool. So the sign was put up here to neutralise the site, it's just neutral information, and this redevelopment is part of the final kind of pieces of the jigsaw of Berlin rebuilding. And soon this will be done, and Berlin will have unhitched yesterday and moves into the future, and I'll be interested to see what that future brings. But I hope you now understand. To understand Berlin gives us an idea about a foundation for the legacy of the Cold War, rivalries for global power, and that's changing now just as Berlin's history is changing, and a new story will be written by new generations shortly. But Berlin, for me, is the place to watch, not just the past to get an idea of the past and why today is the way it is, but to get a handle on the future, something that hasn't happened. And that's why I'm going to stay, and I'll be really happy if you had a look at virtual Berlin tours, or we do another Sandeman's Live. People are sending in some other tours. Kingston, New York is watching as well. Kristen Curry seemed surprised that he killed his wife. Ava Brown, I think the most important person in Ava Brown's life was Ava Brown. She came of her own volition. She said early, I'll be there at his side. It's a kind of a weird bravery. She hadn't done anything wrong, right? I mean, she wouldn't have been the most popular person, but she refuses to leave on Hitler's birthday 10 days before. So she poisoned herself, and Hitler probably shot and poisoned himself as well. But, folks, you want to support me and my colleagues, let's do some more tours. You want to support me and you enjoyed the tour, then PayPal me at Virtual Berlin Tours as well. It's been fantastic. Thank you for your comments. That's the best thing. It's not just me telling you, but it's you asking and us sharing and people's ideas. Thank you, Helmut Holzacker, Michaela D. Hitler killed his dog Blondie first. That's right. That was on April the 28th. You know, Hitler couldn't see that one. He had to leave the room for that. He went in afterwards. But I appreciate any donations you want to make. Have a look and you'll be able to find the links. And I look forward to the next time. But this is Nick in Berlin, Nick Jackson, signing off. And I told you about the weather gods. They've been kind to us, and I've run over a bit, so apologies to everyone. But I'm great that you stuck with me for an hour and 17. Thank you all for coming. You want to make a donation, you'll find the PayPal link in those comments. And I'll leave you now, without me going on and on, but I'll leave you now I'll walk out with a view of going back towards the Brandenburg Gate. So I thank you all. I wish you luck. Stay safe. And I'll see you on the next Sandeman's Live in the near future. Take care, folks.